The corporate atmosphere was incredibly tense, a deliberate architectural choice by Vincent Caldwell designed to keep his subordinates constantly anxious. Dozens of senior managers gathered around an enormous oak table that resembled a theater of war more than a collaborative space. I was positioned near the center, a 52-year-old acquisitions director who had devoted the better part of 2 decades mastering the intricate dance of corporate mergers. My given name is Thomas. I have historically been the dependable professional, the individual who worked late into the night, rigorously verified financial projections, and never elevated his voice, even when circumstances desperately required it. For 6 months, I had channeled every ounce of my professional acumen into a single, comprehensive proposal. It was a meticulously crafted acquisition of a pioneering technology enterprise, a transaction valued at $2.8 million initially. It stood as a triumph of strategic corporate planning. However, as I observed Vincent lift the document, gripping it gingerly between his thumb and index finger as if it were contaminated with a hazardous substance, I understood my immense effort held no value for him. Vincent was 46 years old, an executive whose personal fortune hovered around $300 million and whose industry standing was forged through relentless intimidation. He derived perverse pleasure from public degradation. He scanned the room, ensuring he commanded the undivided focus of every single attendee. Then, releasing a dramatic exhalation, he proclaimed my diligent work to be completely pitiful. The harsh words reverberated through the utterly silent chamber. He did not conclude his tirade there. He informed me that I was obviously unprepared for the highest echelons of business. Subsequently, he grabbed the dense stack of high-grade stationery, representing my half-year of intense labor, and literally ripped it in 2 pieces. The noise of tearing paper was deafening in the quiet space. He carelessly threw the destroyed fragments onto the polished veneer of the table. He anticipated my complete collapse. He foresaw weeping or a swift career-ending explosion of fury. As an alternative, I stared straight into his eyes, bowed my head deliberately, and informed him that his assessment was entirely accurate. The profound bewilderment on his visage provided a minor triumph amidst overwhelming defeat. I calmly collected my surviving documents, sustained my absolute calmness, and strolled out of the room with quiet grace. I could perceive dozens of gazes piercing my back, yet my intellect was previously adjusting its state. I was not departing as a vanquished employee. I was departing with a unique, blazing intention. You must understand, Vincent Caldwell appeared invincible on paper. He was the celebrated darling of the financial press, a noted benefactor, a devoted family patriarch married to a stunning lady named Eleanor. Nevertheless, I recognized the profound decay that simmered underneath his elegant exterior. The transaction he had just annihilated was not solely about corporate profits. It involved a brilliant innovator named Sarah Jenkins. Sarah had engineered a pioneering medical apparatus inspired by her sibling's unusual ailment. She was not motivated by corporate avarice. She desired her invention to rescue patients. My presentation was structured her creative autonomy while granting our organization an enormous competitive advantage. Vincent harbored zero concern for rescuing patients. He merely perceived a figure he deemed excessive, alongside a chance to humiliate a subordinate. Proceeding toward the parking structure, the freezing breeze striking my face, I recognized that Vincent's behavior represented a symptom of a far deeper malignancy. He operated as a dictator who assumed regulations were inapplicable to him. Conversely, I comprehended the regulations far better than he ever could. I understood the statutory requirements. I was intimately familiar with the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, a federal statute enacted to shield investors against deceptive financial disclosures by major corporations. Furthermore, I deduced that an executive like Vincent, who operated recklessly with human livelihoods, was undoubtedly operating recklessly with the corporate ledgers. Resting inside my vehicle, I allowed the tranquility to wash over me. The adrenaline resulting from the clash commenced its fade, supplanted by a calculating, icy fury. I reflected upon the numerous other professionals Vincent had ruined. Individuals like Patricia, a former marketing executive, who had been pushed toward the precipice of despair after Vincent openly mocked her promotional strategy, only to execute it himself 6 months later and claim complete credit. I contemplated Robert, a genius researcher who had been coerced into surrendering his patent ownership under severe duress and was terminated a week later based on entirely manufactured performance deficiencies. Vincent did not merely dismiss personnel, he systematically dismantled them. I, however, refused to be dismantled. I resolved to weaponize his own arrogance against him. I understood that my retaliation could not manifest as a trivial act of vandalism or a vulgar screaming match in the parking lot. It required a methodical, lawful, and absolutely catastrophic approach. I commenced plotting his specific vulnerabilities. Initially, his colossal ego. Vincent required constant validation that he remained the most intelligent presence in any room. Secondly, his matrimonial union. Persistent whispers circulated regarding Eleanor, suggesting she existed essentially as a captive within her own opulent existence. Thirdly, the corporation's impending initial public offering, scheduled to launch in precisely 6 months. Vincent had been guaranteeing investors astronomical dividends, projections that appeared mathematically impossible to fulfill via legitimate operations. I retrieved my cellular device and dialed Sarah Jenkins. She responded on the third ring. I detailed exactly what had transpired within the boardroom. She remained unsurprised. She disclosed that Vincent had covertly contacted her 3 months earlier, proposing a partnership that would have stripped her of all intellectual property ownership. Upon her hesitation, he subtly menaced to leverage his connections within regulatory agencies to guarantee her technology never achieved market approval. That revelation cemented my determination. This situation transcended my damaged pride. It concerned safeguarding innovation and neutralizing a corporate predator. Sarah inquired about my strategy, and I informed her that we were constructing a snare that Vincent Caldwell would enthusiastically step straight into. During the following week, I began assembling a coalition. This endeavor proved too massive to undertake independently. I required allies who comprehended Vincent's tactics and possessed the expertise to expose them publicly. I contacted Barbara, a former board director who had been ousted after challenging Vincent's aggressive accounting methodologies. Barbara maintained trusted contacts inside the enterprise and retained access to a treasure trove of historical financial data. I additionally reached out to James, an investigative reporter who had attempted to unmask Vincent 3 years prior, only to witness his exposé, suppressed by threats of a massive defamation lawsuit. James had been discreetly compiling evidence ever since, simply anticipating the perfect opportunity. Lastly, I recruited Michael, a former systems architect who had been terminated immediately after demonstrating a revolutionary software upgrade that Vincent subsequently claimed as his personal invention. Michael possessed unparalleled expertise regarding secure communications and covert data retrieval. The most vital component of our puzzle, however, remained Eleanor Caldwell. Barbara recommended approaching her, highlighting that Eleanor had sought an escape route for years but remained paralyzed by Vincent's threats to dismantle her charitable foundation. I orchestrated a rendezvous with Eleanor under the pretense of negotiating a philanthropic donation. We convened at a secluded bistro on the city's periphery. She appeared thoroughly exhausted, a jarring contrast to her meticulously maintained public persona. When I delicately introduced the reality of our strategy, she exhibited no anger. She produced a hollow, chilling laugh and elevated her sleeve, exposing fading contusions. She explained that Vincent remained meticulous about never leaving visible marks, that his benevolent public identity constituted a complete fabrication. She consented to assist us, pledging to supply recordings she had covertly captured documenting his abusive tirades and his illicit business instructions. She provided a secure flash drive containing dozens of damning audio files. Reviewing those recordings that evening caused my blood to run cold. We possessed everything necessary to establish a clear pattern of abuse, corporate fraud, and severe violations of governance statutes. The initiative was evolving from a straightforward whistleblower complaint into a comprehensive demolition that would utilize every legal and public relations instrument at our disposal. The final stage commenced with Sarah Jenkins. We required a contemporary piece of evidence, something entirely undeniable. Sarah contacted Vincent, asserting she had reconsidered his previous offer and felt amenable to discussing a direct partnership, circumventing my involvement entirely. Vincent, his ego sufficiently stroked, eagerly summoned her for a private consultation at his executive office. Michael had outfitted Sarah with a state-of-the-art recording apparatus concealed within a premium writing instrument. It proved completely undetectable. While Sarah attended the meeting, I occupied a table at a coffee shop directly across the street, nursing a cup of black coffee, my heart pounding aggressively against my ribs. 3 hours later, Sarah exited the building. She entered the coffee shop, her complexion pale yet resolute. She slid the writing instrument across the table's surface. That evening, our complete team convened in a secure location to review the audio capture. Vincent had devoted the initial hour to charming her, but soon his genuine nature surfaced. He elaborated on his schemes to misappropriate her patents and marginalize her completely. He chuckled about the simplicity of manipulating the regulatory framework to destroy her livelihood should she offer resistance. However, the most incriminating segment occurred when he referenced me. He boasted about how he had systematically undermined my professional trajectory over the past year, obstructing my advancement opportunities and disseminating fabricated rumors concerning my psychological stability, entirely because I reminded him of his spouse, because I possessed that identical expression of defiance. It constituted a definitive admission of tortious interference and unlawful retaliation. We had ensnared him completely. We dedicated the entire night to orchestrating the ultimate strike. James finalized his article, a meticulously sourced investigative piece detailing Vincent's financial irregularities and abusive methodologies. Barbara arranged the financial documentation into a comprehensive dossier destined for the Securities and Exchange Commission. Michael configured a secure digital server, programmed to simultaneously transmit the evidence cache to the board of directors and the primary institutional investors supporting the impending public offering. Furthermore, Eleanor drafted a statement for a press conference she intended to host the subsequent morning, announcing a novel initiative designed to combat domestic abuse among high-profile executives, a maneuver that would implicitly indict Vincent without breaching any restrictive gag orders. We were prepared to unleash absolute devastation. On the following dawn, the snare closed with impeccable precision. At exactly 9 o'clock, James's exposé became active on a prominent financial news platform. By 9:15, the corporation's stock valuation was already beginning to plummet, and an emergency board convention was convened. While Vincent remained sequestered in that boardroom, frantically attempting to mitigate the fallout stemming from the article, Michael activated the transmission. The secure server dispatched the monumental cache of evidence to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the board members, and the elite investors. The evidence incorporated the undeniable verification of accounting fraud, demonstrating violations of numerous provisions within the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, alongside the audio recordings documenting his threats and domestic abuse. At noon, Eleanor conducted her press conference, her quiet dignity serving as a powerful contrast to the sheer chaos enveloping her husband's enterprise. I strolled into the corporate headquarters and navigated toward Vincent's private office. His administrative assistant, overwhelmed by the incessantly ringing telephones, scarcely acknowledged my presence. I occupied one of the leather chairs positioned opposite his desk, simply waiting. 40 minutes later, Vincent stormed into the room, his countenance a mask of unadulterated rage. He failed to notice me initially. When he finally raised his eyes, he demanded to know my purpose for being there, aggressively threatening to summon security personnel. I simply smiled with complete serenity. I informed him that I desired to be present when he finally realized his reign was completely over. He scoffed dismissively, asserting he would effortlessly survive the negative journalism. I methodically informed him that the board possessed the recordings, the investors had withdrawn their capital, and the federal authorities were already scrutinizing the evidence, proving his financial felonies. The color immediately drained from his face as the crushing reality of his predicament crystallized. He attempted to lunge toward me, but I pointedly reminded him regarding the active security cameras installed within his own office. He collapsed backward into his chair, a thoroughly broken individual. I stood upright, informed him that my professional work stood upon its own inherent merits, and confidently walked out. The subsequent aftermath proved swift and exceedingly brutal. Vincent was officially removed as chief executive officer by the conclusion of the business day. Within a single week, formal criminal charges were officially filed against him. Eleanor was swiftly granted a divorce alongside total administrative control of their charitable foundation. Sarah and I secured her technology and launched our own firm, an enterprise constructed upon foundational ethics and genuine technological innovation. We named it Restitution Partners. I never received further communication from Vincent, but I remained aware he was facing substantial years inside federal prison for his numerous crimes. True justice had been definitively served, not through chaotic shouting or physical violence, but through deliberate patience, meticulous strategy, and the unwavering power of the truth. The legal proceedings that followed were nothing short of a spectacle. Once the initial shockwave of the article subsided, the real battle began in the sterile courtrooms of the federal justice system. Vincent, refusing to accept his downfall, hired a small army of defense attorneys. They were aggressive, attempting to discredit James, Eleanor, and anyone else who dared speak against him. However, they drastically underestimated the sheer volume of evidence we had meticulously gathered. The Securities and Exchange Commission launched a full-scale forensic audit of the corporate accounts. They discovered a labyrinth of shell companies and falsified revenue reports, confirming every allegation of financial misconduct. It was a textbook case of securities fraud, a brazen violation of corporate trust that left the regulatory agents astounded by its scale. The audio recordings provided by Eleanor proved to be the most devastating weapon in our arsenal. When the prosecution played snippets of his abusive rants during the preliminary hearings, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew incredibly heavy. Hearing his voice dripping with malice and arrogance stripped away the carefully cultivated facade of the brilliant business leader. It exposed the cruel, calculating predator hiding beneath the expensive suits. Even his most staunch defenders on the corporate board began to distance themselves, issuing public statements condemning his actions and pledging full cooperation with the federal authorities. Meanwhile, the civil lawsuits began to pile up. Former employees, emboldened by our success, came forward with their own stories of harassment, stolen intellectual property, and wrongful termination. Patricia filed a massive defamation suit, finally finding the courage to reclaim her professional reputation. Robert, the researcher whose patents had been stolen, initiated legal action to recover his rightful ownership. The company, desperate to salvage its plunging stock price and appease furious shareholders, chose to settle most of these claims rapidly, further draining the resources Vincent had relied upon for his defense. The stress of the compounding legal battles visibly aged him. The once imposing figure who had casually destroyed my proposal now appeared haggard and diminished, a man constantly looking over his shoulder as his empire crumbled brick by brick. As Vincent faced the absolute destruction of his legacy, Sarah and I focused on building something entirely new. Restitution Partners was founded on the principle that innovation should be nurtured, not exploited. We secured a modest office space in a developing tech corridor, far removed from the towering glass skyscrapers of our previous corporate lives. Our first major project was, of course, Sarah's medical technology. Without the suffocating pressure of Vincent's demands, she finalized the prototype ahead of schedule. We approached a consortium of ethical investors, individuals who prioritized long-term societal impact over short-term financial gain. When we presented the finalized product, there were no dramatic boardroom confrontations or torn documents. There was only genuine enthusiasm and a shared vision for the future. The funding we secured dwarfed the original proposal I had brought to Vincent, proving that ethical business practices could yield extraordinary results. Eleanor also became a crucial partner in our new venture. She utilized the resources of her newly independent foundation to establish a support network for whistleblowers and victims of corporate abuse. She funded legal counsel for employees facing retaliation and created mentorship programs for young professionals navigating toxic work environments. Her transformation from a silent victim to a powerful advocate was nothing short of inspiring. She frequently visited our offices, her presence a constant reminder of the human cost of unchecked corporate greed. Together, we created a coalition that actively challenged the predatory culture Vincent had championed. We hosted seminars, published articles on corporate governance, and worked closely with regulatory agencies to close the loopholes that allowed executives to exploit their subordinates. It was exhausting work, often requiring long hours and difficult conversations, but it was profoundly fulfilling. Every success we achieved felt like a vindication, a proof that the relentless pursuit of profit did not have to come at the expense of human dignity. The culmination of our efforts arrived during Vincent's criminal trial. I was called to testify as a key witness regarding the events that transpired in that freezing conference room. Walking to the witness stand, I felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, but this time it was tempered by a deep sense of calm. I recounted the incident precisely as it happened, describing his theatrical destruction of my proposal and his subsequent threats. Vincent's defense attorney attempted to rattle me, suggesting I was simply a disgruntled employee seeking vengeance for a failed project. I maintained my composure, answering each question with measured, factual responses. I explained that my actions were not driven by petty vengeance, but by a legal obligation to report severe financial irregularities and protect innocent stakeholders. I detailed the specific mechanisms of his fraud, explaining how his actions violated core principles of fiduciary duty and corporate transparency. By the time I finished my testimony, the defense narrative had thoroughly collapsed. The jury deliberated for less than 2 days before returning a verdict of guilty on all counts, including securities fraud, wire fraud, and witness tampering. When the judge read the sentence, a lengthy term in a federal penitentiary, Vincent showed no remorse, only a lingering disbelief that his power had finally failed him. Watching him being escorted from the courtroom in handcuffs provided a profound sense of closure. It was not a joyous moment, but rather a solemn acknowledgement that the system, when properly leveraged by courageous individuals, could still hold the powerful accountable. The monster had been slain, not with a sword, but with a paper trail and the unwavering truth. Years later, the legacy of that initial confrontation continues to shape my life. Restitution Partners has grown into a highly respected advisory firm, known for its uncompromising ethical standards and its dedication to protecting innovators. Sarah's medical device is now utilized in hospitals globally, saving countless lives and fulfilling her original vision. Patricia leads our marketing division, her confidence fully restored and her strategic brilliance finally recognized. Robert successfully reclaimed his patents and serves as our chief scientific officer. As for me, I no longer worry about pleasing tyrannical bosses or surviving toxic boardrooms. I spend my days working alongside people I respect, building deals that create genuine value rather than just inflating a stock price. Sometimes, I still think about that shredded document, the $2.8 million proposal that started it all. I keep one half of a torn page framed in my office, a silent reminder of the day I decided to stop playing by the rules of a rigged game. It serves as a testament to the fact that true power does not reside in intimidation or wealth, but in the courage to stand up, speak the truth, and refuse to be broken. The journey was arduous, fraught with risk and uncertainty, but looking back at the vibrant, ethical company we built from the ashes of Vincent's empire, I know with absolute certainty that every moment of struggle was entirely worthwhile. We didn't just survive the fire, we used it to forge something unbreakable. The prolonged aftermath of the trial revealed even more deeply embedded corruption within the industry, prompting a sweeping federal investigation into several competing firms. The initial shockwave that toppled Vincent Caldwell acted as a catalyst, emboldening numerous other silenced employees across various corporations to finally step forward and share their own harrowing experiences of exploitation. Regulatory agencies previously criticized for their sluggish response times and lenient enforcement suddenly found themselves armed with a wealth of actionable intelligence and immense public pressure to enact meaningful reform. We found our new firm positioned squarely at the epicenter of this unprecedented corporate reckoning. We were no longer simply an advisory group. We evolved into a symbol of resistance against unchecked executive overreach. Prominent media outlets frequently requested our commentary on corporate governance, and our team became highly sought-after speakers at industry conferences focused on ethical leadership. The sheer volume of inquiries we received from brilliant creators desperate to protect their intellectual property was staggering, validating our core mission every single day. We expanded our operations, hiring additional legal experts and financial analysts who shared our unwavering commitment to transparency and fairness. The culture within our own walls stood as a stark contrast to the toxic environment we had escaped. We fostered an atmosphere of radical collaboration, where every voice was valued and open debate was actively encouraged. There were no freezing conference rooms designed to intimidate, nor were there explosive tantrums over perceived failures. Instead, we celebrated collective successes and treated setbacks as valuable learning opportunities, proving conclusively that a business could achieve exceptional profitability without sacrificing its fundamental humanity. The contrast was particularly poignant for those of us who had survived the Caldwell era. We often reflected on the sheer absurdity of his leadership style, marveling at how a system could enable such destructive behavior for so long. The systemic changes we helped initiate began to ripple outward, influencing legislative proposals aimed at strengthening whistleblower protections and increasing personal accountability for corporate executives involved in financial malfeasance. It felt as though a massive, heavy curtain had been lifted, exposing the hidden machinations of power and forcing a long overdue cleansing of the corporate landscape. The journey from a humiliated employee, staring at a shredded proposal to a founding partner of a transformative enterprise, was undeniably arduous, yet it imparted a profound understanding of resilience. We demonstrated that the ultimate revenge is not found in inflicting equivalent suffering upon your adversaries, but in systematically dismantling the structures that empowered them and subsequently building a superior paradigm in their place. This philosophy became the bedrock of everything we undertook, a guiding principle that ensured we would never replicate the catastrophic failures of the past. As our influence expanded, we remained fiercely dedicated to our original purpose, shielding the vulnerable, nurturing true innovation, and relentlessly pursuing justice in a world too often governed by unrestrained greed. The narrative of our triumph served as an enduring beacon of hope for countless professionals. Navigating their own professional nightmares, a concrete reminder that even the most formidable corporate titans possess fatal vulnerabilities, and that the truth, when strategically deployed by determined individuals, remains the most devastating weapon of all. Looking back today, I realize that the ordeal was the crucible that forged my true professional identity. Every single challenge, every moment of doubt, and every late-night strategizing session contributed to the foundation of the person I am now. I no longer fear the imposing boardrooms or the aggressive corporate titans who believe they rule the world. We proved that integrity, when backed by unyielding determination and meticulous planning, can dismantle even the most entrenched corruption. Our journey stands as a testament to the fact that doing the right thing, however difficult, ultimately yields the most profound and lasting rewards.